Welcome to Using Organizational Values as a Planning and Accountability Tool. I'm Mike Coffey, President of Imperative Information Group, and I just welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I hope this is useful. Today's webinar is pre-approved by SHRM for 1 hour of professional development credit and by HRCI for 1 hour business recertification credit. And what will happen is at the end of the webinar, my team will get the people information for the people who actually showed up and registered and attended the webinar. And then you'll get an email later today or first thing tomorrow with all the recertification information. Throughout the webinar, feel free to drop questions. Use the chat box, if you will, if you have any questions, and I'll try to pay attention to those as we go along, and if either answer them then or make sure they get answered later on during the webinar. Great. Let's get going then. So we talk about values, and that's not a new topic, right? For 25 plus, maybe 30 years, companies have been talking about values. And usually employees kind of roll their eyes. Some organizations have a really great sense of the kind of behavior that they want to incentivize, and they really have a company culture that builds that. And others, well, it's just basically pictures on the wall and, happy posters, those kinds of things. But your values, just think about the word value. What is the behavior that your organization values? In other words, what behavior do we select employees about? What do we incentivize? What do we reward? That's what your values really are. So values like learning or trust or whatever sound great, and they sound very noble, but in reality, a lot of organizations have learning as one of their values, but they spend precious little money or effort in helping their employees learn, build skills and do those things that bring them, forward in the organization. So I think that's one of the real risks that companies have when we start talking about values, is what we really aren't. We're not going to get there based on just some, pie in the sky stuff. We've got to make an investment of time. We got to build it into our strategy to make sure that we really have values that reflect what the organization, how things get done in the organization. Those values really have to be consistent across the organization. You can't have a sales organization over here that's really cutthroat and teamwork isn't a priority here, but then expect teamwork and any other value words like that to work in the rest of the organization. The values, how we get things done in this organization, is through teamwork. That's great. But if people in accounting or people in operations see that over in sales, it's every man for himself, and those guys are making having all kinds of success, and that's where they're getting rewarded, that's where the money's being made, then the rest of the organization is going to follow that behavior. And so it really needs to be consistent. It needs to be understood by everybody what those words mean when we say teamwork or learning environment, or like at Imperative, ours are always act in the best interest of the client, always work as one with compassion and respect, and always act with integrity. And everybody in my organization can recite those, and they can also give examples of what that looks like and doesn't look like. But in many organizations, they know the words, but they really don't have a sense of what it really means in the organization. So there are actually 3 different kinds of values then, right? We've got our actual values, how things really get done in the organization. What do we really reward? What do we really incentivize? how do we, what kind of people do we select as employees and as leadership? That's really where you see your values. I mean, you've got values as an organization, whether they're on the posters or they're on the ID cards or whatever. You have values. The real question is, are those really how things get done? Or do you orient employees on the first day of work? Well, here's our values, and here's everything that we aspire to as an organization. And then when they actually are in their work area, somebody pulls them aside and says, yeah, that's real nice, but let me show you how this really happens. And here's what you really have to do to get ahead in the organization or to get anything done. And then there are aspirational values. Maybe we realize we need change as an organization. And to achieve our strategy, we need a different kind of behavior. Maybe we're going from a commodity-based business where customer service isn't a giant priority, and we're just trying to be the low bidder on every project and get product out the door. Great, there's nothing wrong with that business plan. But let's say we want to transition away from that to a more premium product that's higher customer service, and that our clients will pay more for. Well, now we've got a value misalignment. We've got a whole organization built around low customer service. You get what you pay for. We send it out the door and it's gone. Versus a high customer service, more premium type product that probably involves more relationships with clients, more hand-holding when clients have questions, those kind of things. So we know there's a gap there, but we're going to call out that this is the behavior that will get us to where we want to go. And we as an organization are going to start hiring and rewarding employees based on that behavior. That's a real challenge, right? It's a very difficult thing to do, to change the values, because generally our organizations hire people with and train them and orient them to the values that we need at a specific time, and those people generally their values align with that too. And so now we're going to turn the car 180 degrees and go the other direction. Some people are going to need to get out of the car. They're just not a good fit in that organization, and that's what that whole process will look like as we move in the organization to a different set of values. And then there's the values where we just know people aren't necessarily going to actually act like the way we want them to do, but it feels really good. It looks good in our marketing materials. It's great when customers come visit and we've got these posters on the wall that, say peace, love, and whatever. But in reality, when they come to deal with us, or we hire these new employees and they come in the organization, they realize it's completely different, and we have no intention of changing. It's just marketing fluff. And unfortunately, I think that happens in too many organizations, that they really don't get that kind of attention to really implementing what they say their organization values are. So the first thing when we're going to talk about our values is let's figure out as an organization what our current state of our values are. How do we reward people? What's the perception from employees about who advances in the organization? And so how do we, and with our customers and other stakeholders. So first we need to have just interviews. We need to sit down and talk to employers or employees, customers, suppliers, all the other stakeholders in the organization, and maybe even in the broader community, because your business has an impact on more than just those initial, your standard stakeholders of your customers, employees, and maybe vendors and shareholders. And so we need to have interviews, and with employees, we're asking questions like, why do you get up in the morning and come to work every day? What is that? Why don't you go work someplace else? Why don't you go look for another job? And then maybe do behavioral event interviewing. Tell me about a time when in the organization where you felt like you couldn't be successful because of the organization's culture. Or tell me about a time where you were successful and you think that was unique to this organization. Tell me how what you've experienced in this organization that may be different than organizations in that you've worked for previously. Those kind of questions, and then start peeling that onion to figure out what when you get it right down to the core, what is the value statement we're making about how people are treated, rewarded, incentivized, that sort of thing. Tell me about a time where you were proud to be an employee here. That's a great question. When was the last time you were disappointed in the organization? Those things will give you, and as you dig deeper and deeper in them, a really better sense of who the where the organization is, who and how, who you're hiring and how they're getting things done. So another thing you can do is a net promoter score. How likely would you be as an on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend working for this company as a current employee? How or based on your last month of experience at this company, how likely would you be to recommend to a friend or colleague that they consider a job at this organization? And that'll give you some sense that, especially with the follow-up questions from an NPS, Net Promoter Score, that tells you where you stand with your employees. Another thing you can do to evaluate the current situation is look at the performance metrics for your top performers. Who's considered a top performer in your organization, and what are their metrics? What are we rewarding them for? What are we actually rewarding them for? What are they, what are we seeing in their paychecks, in their titles, and their scope of responsibility? Maybe other departments have, different departments have different performance measures, and maybe it's really jumbled. And so we need to look in different departments and see, in this department, what is the behavior that gets somebody to move ahead, and or what does this department consider success? If revenue is just the bottom line number, then that's going to be really different than if you're concerned more about customer service and some of those items as well. Not revenue is always an issue, but there's oftentimes, if just shooting for revenue is not going to get us the kind of place where we have the kind of people we want to work with, and where the kind where we can be our best company and people can be their best self at work. But we got to remember that when we're looking at these metrics, we get what we measure. And so what are the, just looking strictly at the metrics. So, how are departments and individuals, how is their performance measured? That's going to tell you what you really value. And then look at your most recent employee terminations, the involuntary ones, and then separately probably the voluntary terms, employees who left. Are there any behaviors, performance standards, or performance issues that are consistent across those groups? And maybe you'll see that, our best leaders, our best team players are the ones who are voluntarily leaving the organization. And maybe that tells us something that we need to dig deeper into as we look into our values. Or maybe if we look at the people we're terminating, we're saying, this guy wasn't a team player. This lady was not somebody who supported the rest of her coworkers, whatever. And maybe we see, we are terminating people for the right reasons according to what we've determined to be our values. And then you look at all this information, gather all of that, and say, okay, so where the organization is headed, what we've set as our vision, what our 3-year goals are, maybe 5-year goals, whatever we're doing, what kind of behavior do we need more of in order to get where we want to go, versus what the behavior we need less of. And this is a great exercise you can do in your, even in your, inside of your HR group or in smaller groups, if we're not going to look at this company wide yet, but in your, maybe you've got an annual planning meeting of some sort for your team, have everybody go around and first identify for each other person, what is the one behavior that we really appreciate from you this past year? What behavior has really, helped move the organization forward? And then move back around, and from every person in the group, and this takes a high level of accountability and trust, but what's the one behavior we need less of you from in the coming year? And so maybe you've got a great performer who, this is great, we just want you to keep doing more of this. And maybe that's, always being willing to jump in and help other people get their jobs done. That's great. But maybe what we need less of is taking taking things on a personal level when you get any kind of feedback. But again, going through as an organization, looking at what behaviors we need more of and less of, can funnel down to the lower level departments as well, and can be pretty instructive. So when, we love talking about goals, conducting SWOT analysis, participating in all these strategic planning retreats. It's really exciting, but it's often pretty pointless because we don't really execute on these things, because we don't ask the question, what are we willing to change? So when Hernan Cortez came to the New World, the story is that he brought all his men off the ships onto what's now called Mexico, and then he burned the ships. And he said, this is behavior that we're we're burning these ships, we're not going back, you don't have any choice. We as an organization, as a group of people, are moving forward, and there's no retreat from this. And the same would go in your organization. What behaviors, what habits as an organization are we willing to change, not look back? And then maybe what are we not unwilling to change? Which boats are we unwilling to burn? And we've got to figure that out before we really set as an organization. These are the things we value, because the things you value are going to be reflected in the choices about how you do business, what you're willing to give up to achieve your goals, and what you're not willing to do to achieve your goals. And then, of course, everybody in the organization has to be on the same diet, right? Everybody, the values have to be the same across the organization. And if we aren't willing to, insist that all of our leadership exhibits all of these values, then we're going to have a problem. We're going to lose those high performers who want to go someplace else because leadership's not living the values that these people were promised, really, that this is the kind of organization we are. And you're going to have inconsistencies in customer relationships, things like that as well. And so are we really willing to get everybody in leadership on the same page, even if that means some people in leadership may have to leave? That's a hard question for a lot of folks to face. And then we have to define our values, okay? And they need to be those things that we're really willing to go to the mat for. And you don't need a list of 15 of them. I've seen organizations with really long values lists. And if an employee can't simply recite what the values are off the top of their head without just a ton of rote memorization, you're probably not doing it, okay? You're probably not getting there. Maybe 3 to 5 values, a number that really a number of values that really define and characterize who you are as an organization, and maybe honestly who you aspire to be. And so again, there's nothing wrong with those aspirational values that don't really reflect our current reality, but this is the future state. This is where we're going as an organization. one of the great ways to do that is identify those employees you want more of. You look at in your HR department or in sales or in operations, identify the 3 or 4 people. If we had, 5 more Katies, we as an organization would really be rocking. And so what's unique about Katie? Maybe it's some competencies and things like that, but most often it's values. It's how Katie is best incentivized and rewarded. And and I'm not talking about just straight, again, you get what you measure. So maybe it's not just straight revenue or straight production numbers. Maybe it is also, we look at Katie and we see that Katie is somebody who is, always puts the customer first, bends over backwards to make sure that we anticipate problems before the client ever does, and just has an amazing relationship with those clients. And then you identify, in, let's say in operations, your top 3 or 4 people like that, and you start looking at each one of them and say, okay, here's the through line for all these people. And again, maybe it's, that they really value the customer relationships. Maybe they're really team players. Maybe they're always learning. They really are learners. And so maybe those are the values. That's who helps the organization move forward. And so it's not just those people. We've all had employees who hit their numbers, right? Especially in sales organizations, we've got employees who are just real alpha dogs and step on everybody else. And in some cases, maybe that's fine. But if you're looking for an organization that's more teamwork oriented, and more, just generally on the same page, maybe we need to step back and look and say, given that some values, what this person values and what gets them ahead isn't what we want more of in the organization. And so you may define that, yeah, we've got some alpha dog salespeople, but they're crushing all the other people and it's causing horrible turnover, which is ultimately affecting revenue. And so maybe we need a different set of values in our sales organization so that everybody can produce and rise our organization even higher in sales than we would have been with just a couple top performers and everybody else just getting, ground under in an unsupportive organization. And the values should be really clear. They should be so simple that anybody recognizes them when they see them. At Imperative, when we've got a new employee, on the first day I take them to lunch and we talk about the history of the company and our values. That's all the time, and that person's own background, because usually I haven't ever talked to them by the time we've hired them. And but I want to get to know them. But we go through the values, and I'll talk through each of them and tell them what that looks like. So always act with integrity is one of our values. And I explain that means really 2 things in our organization. Integrity, like doing the right thing and following through and doing what you say you're going to do. That's integrity. But there's also the kind of integrity that means that something is suitable for the purpose for which it was designed. And so like when we're delivering background checks to clients, we want to make sure that we're not just giving them a piece of paper to stick in an employee's file, that it's a reliable source of information about this person's past history so that our clients make a well-informed decision. So it's got integrity from the point of like structural integrity. It means, we know what it looks like. We know it's good for the purpose that the client is asking for. And so those are what those 2 things look like. And so the behaviors that go with those, would be admitting, always act with integrity, admitting when I've made a mistake, seeking help when I'm not sure what to do, but also going that extra mile when there's a question with data. Sometimes, a lot of times the information from the courts isn't real clear. And we're a premium background check company. Our clients pay a premium to work with us. And so rather than just dumping incomplete information into the client's lap, we're going to go back and make sure that we understand the information. We've obtained whatever additional details may have been missing, and then we hand that information to our clients in a way that's useful for the clients to use. So it's built for a specific purpose and usable for that purpose. And so that's how we have those conversations in our organization about all three of those values. So people recognize them when they happen. And so when they're faced with a circumstance and they're not sure what to do, the first response is always go back to the values. So they really need to be clear. And then they need to be recognized. So when, when you've got your values set in the organization, there should be opportunity for people to get recognition for executing the values. If we get what we reward and we get more of what we reward. So it may be hard to measure, put a number on values, but certainly your peers and the rest of the organization, customers, vendors, strategic partners, encouraging them to be aware of your values and to give feedback when they see somebody living those values out, or when they're disappointed, when those values weren't part of an exchange or an interaction. A real good test on whether your values are good. Well, then this goes for your personal values as a human and as your organization. Can you talk to somebody about your values without breaking eye contact with them? Because it's really hard to look somebody right in the eye and tell them something that you know is not true. And if you say it and you don't break eye contact, you know that you're having to force yourself. And so that's a really good way to say, okay, maybe we're falling short here and we need to look deeper here. Another question you could ask yourself, okay, we've got these values, we've defined them, they're clear, but are we really willing to fire somebody because they don't live those values out? And if you're not willing to fire someone because they don't get it or they don't want to operate according to those values, they are probably not really your values as an organization. And the final question, once you define these 3 to 5, hopefully, values, is, does our leadership really demonstrate these values 100% of the time in everything we do? Are these values something that leadership will hold themselves accountable to, and will let the organization hold them accountable to? And going into the future, maybe these are aspirational values and we're changing the organization. Is leadership really willing to make the personal sacrifices to reap the benefits into the future of changing our values if it comes down to it? Those are hard things for leadership to do in some organizations. So you definitely want to ask yourself these questions, especially before you publicize them. I'm a big fan of creating organizational change without telling the world about it. I'm convinced that if you're really living your values, the feedback you get from customers, from employees, from your vendors, your strategic partners, will be demonstrated already. People will already have a sense of what your values are without ever looking at the posters you've got on the wall or whatever information is on your website. Because in reality, if this is really what we value as an organization, people will experience that as part of who they are and what their experiences with the organization. So without ever, directly being told what the values are, their own experience, and this is Helen Keller with President Eisenhower. The idea is that without being told, we've got an idea of who this organization is just from our interactions. And then if your leadership really is committed to that and you're rewarding, incentivizing folks according to those values, it becomes pretty apparent. And certainly when Imperative, we probably 2012, 2013, we sat down to really look at what our values were and the kind of organization we wanted to be, and where we were right then. We did that current state exercise. And what we did was list, especially on the operations side, the top 3 or 4 employees. If we had 3 or 4 of each of these people, if our organization was really made up of people like this, who would they be? Who would we want to replicate? And sure enough, and I was gratified, and to this day I still am, that the people who we chose as and who we knew were our best performers, and the folks we wanted more of, we listed what was great about each one of those folks. What was it that made them unique? And you could see the through lines between all those people, the consistencies. And again, it boiled down to integrity, that teamwork aspect, working as one with compassion and respect, and always acting in the best interest of the client. And I was thrilled, because those are probably, if I just sat down on my own, I would have come up with very similar values. That's what I wanted as an organization. And as the owner, that's the kind of organization I wanted to work for. I'd quit previous organizations in the corporate world because they didn't have those kind of values. And so I was really gratified when I saw that. But then when we defined them and rolled them out to the employees were like, oh yeah, that's who we are. And that was even better, because they saw it. And as we talked, to customers, did net promoter score surveys and things like that over the last 10, 12 years, we've consistently had that same message from our clients, and we keep hearing the same messages. So that tells me we're on track with where we need to be. Do we fall short sometimes? Every organization does, and we are too. We're going to have failures. And if somebody fails, we don't beat them up again. Work is one with compassion and respect is one of our values. But if somebody just doesn't get it, or doesn't want to get it, and their values just won't line up, that's when they have to leave the organization. And it's a shame, but changing somebody's core behaviors and how they really see the world is almost impossible. They can modify their behavior for a while, but their worldview and what they really value may be so different from ours that I'm wasting my time and theirs, and all I'm doing is frustrating us both by having them try to change their behavior. And so sometimes you just have to say, in order for us to be the organization we need to be, this person is going to have to go. But as we decide what the values are and we roll them out to the organization, that's where we have to be in this position where we can tell the story, where we can explain to people with concrete examples what this looks like in our organization. Joe in accounting did this and this and this, and it led this customer to reach back out to us and say thank you. Or this new employee in shipping and receiving took this action, took this initiative, and it reflected this value, and it brought value to the organization. Those kind of things, those stories, and showing people these are the things we recognize you for in the organization as they enter the organization, and then using them again as a coaching tool along the way. And then your values should drive your organizational planning. If you really say these are the things as an organization that we value, well, then as you're doing your strategic plans, as you're thinking through who we want to be as an organization, those values should be part of your strategic planning. And so, like, at the very beginning of strategic planning process, we look at our values every time. Are these still our values? Are these still the things that as an organization in the coming year and the coming 3 to 5 years, these are the behaviors that are going to move us forward and that to where we want to be as an organization. And it may mean we may never be the biggest background check company in the United States, much less Texas, but it means that the kind of client we serve will be gratified and appreciate what we give them. And I think knowing that is and having that niche. I mean, I'm all about profitability. I own the company. I need the company to be profitable to pay for my kids' orthodontia and all of that. But at the same time, knowing who we serve and how we serve them is critical to our strategic planning process. So we always review values at the very beginning of the process. And if there's a disagreement about the values, we don't proceed with the planning until we've resolved that. And so sometimes there'll be a new team member who's not been through a strategic planning process, and we'll go through that process and they'll say, what does that really mean? I've been here for 3 months, 6 months, and we've talked about, always working as one with compassion and respect, but I see this example in the organization where we're not doing that, or where we rewarded somebody who wasn't living that way. And that stops all other planning. Let's talk through that circumstance. Let's make sure that we all agree that this is our current state, or it's aspirational, but it's where we want to go as an organization. We're willing to make sacrifices. And then as we're evaluating as an organization, new initiatives in the organization, maybe we want to get into a new line of business, maybe we want to acquire another company, whatever. We need to use our mission and our vision, but also our values as the lens through which we examine those opportunities. Let's say, and if Imperative had a fourth value, it would probably be something along the lines of, I guess probably integrity covers it, but it'd be something along the lines of delivering best in class quality as far as the products we deliver. And so maybe we were looking at an acquisition that was more of a, your standard background check, a $30 piece of paper in the file that, misses a lot of records, and clients get the records, the reports, and they don't know what they mean. That's fine. That's a great business model. It's a pretty lucrative business model. And it, for a lot of clients, they're perfectly happy with a $30 background check. That's not what we do. And would it make sense for Imperative to get into the business of, delivering those kind of reports to our clients, or to acquire a company with maybe a lot of clients? Can we ask our employees to turn on and turn off their values in order to, with this commodity type product over here, serve one set of clients, and then turn on the values on this side and serve these other clients over here with more quality and customer service and all that? And I would argue we can't. In fact, we acquired a company a few years ago that was right in line with our values. Other big screening companies in the industry had looked at that background screening company, PFC. It was based in California, and as an acquisition target, and they all said, "Oh no, we don't want those clients." They did mostly background checks for nanny agencies and for high wealth homes, domestic staff, nannies, drivers, and things like that. And so it's real high touch, white glove treatment. And most of the background screening companies, and the big guys who would normally be the ones looking at acquiring business by buying other companies, said, "Oh no, we don't want that because we can't keep those clients." And they recognize that we're not in that kind of business, and so they turned it down. But several people told the owner of that organization, "You need to talk to Mike Coffey in Texas. He does the same thing. It's the same kind of organization." And so they called me up, and it was a match made in heaven. And now we've got these amazing clients all over the country who we continue to serve. And we didn't have to change anything internally as far as who we hire or the kind of products. So that was part of that acquisition process, was making sure those values lined up. In fact, Lynn Peterson, who owned that company, really grilled me. I went out to San Francisco to meet her with my VP of operations, and we sat down, and I thought, okay, I'm buying a company, so she's gonna, I'm the buyer, she'll have to sell me on buying her company. It was the other way around. She put me to the, just really grilled me about how we do our research, how we treat our customers, those kinds of things, because she didn't want to see her baby handed off to to somebody who wasn't going to care for it. And that's what we need to do. And this, I don't mean all this to be just about Imperative, but that's, as an organization, what you need to be looking at as you examine any new initiatives is, what does this say about what we value as an organization, both behaviorally, how we treat people, how we treat customers, how we treat vendors, all those kinds of things. And and it's always possible that you say, yeah, we need, this commodity business, we can't turn that away. That's what we need to do. And then you say, okay, can we continue to serve one group of customers over here and another group of customers over here? Maybe you can. I've not ever really seen that work. I mean, there's a reason that you go to, McDonald's and get a hamburger and you don't get fried chicken. We've all, we know who our customers are and how we serve them. And trying to get outside of that is usually not a great way for a company to succeed. So if there's that disconnect between what we're thinking about doing and what we really say we value and in reality execute, then maybe we need to re-examine whether that's an opportunity that's appropriate for our organization. And one way we do that, there's a great book called Traction. And this is a few years old now, but the book is called Traction, and it's by Gino Wickman, and it's an outline of what he calls the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS. And basically, what EOS does is all the basic stuff you read in Jim Collins and all these other great business writers. Gino Wickman, inside this book Traction, just laid it out. And this is his version of a simple business plan, but it works great. And you can see when we're doing our annual planning, we go through all of this, and you can see that we always act with integrity, always work as one with respect and compassion, always act in the best interest of the client. The first thing we look at when we're looking at our values is, or looking at our strategic planning, is our core values. And then we go into our focus, who we serve, what our niche is. So we really define the business we do. But I think it's really critical. And I've implemented Traction, not only in my company, I've implemented it with SHRM chapters. When I was president of Fort Worth HR, we implemented this and use that for strategic planning. I've my church is implementing it right now. So and you can do this in departments. I've seen organizations, where maybe HR, certainly where HR didn't have the flex with leadership to get leadership to get on board with changing how we're doing everything. So just inside their department, that HR leader said, here's how we're going to design what we do as an HR organization. And they use these same tools. The book is Traction by Gino Wickman. I strongly recommend it. I don't make a dime from selling his books, but it radically changed the effectiveness of our organization and how we strategically plan. And I think it's critical that organizations use some kind of tool like this that leads with their values as they're planning everything else that they're going to do as an organization. And then we need that as we're selecting employees and onboarding employees, we need to make sure that we're a values first organization, that we hire employees. You should have, I'm convinced that most of the jobs in your organization, you can find people with the competencies to do the job. If you're hiring engineers, you can find engineers if you look hard enough. Right now, it's a little hard, or in medical or whatever. Competencies are important. But if somebody is, got the basic qualifications to do the job, you can usually slot them in the organization and they can do the job. But the problem is when you have to terminate people, it's usually not because they're not competent. It's because of a values misalignment. It's because their behavior wasn't right for your environment. And they may have been successful elsewhere with the same behavior, but your culture, your environment, how things get done in your organization are completely different. And, I can tell you it's rare. We've got a great hiring process that really works perfect for us. And I'm the HR guy who owns a background screening company. And so I kind of figured it out over the last 22 years, how to hire the right kind of people to do this kind of really detailed and tedious work. that I would never be able to do, by the way, because I'm way too ADD and I couldn't do it. But my employees are amazing. I figured that out. But I can hire people to do the technical part, but finding the people with the behavior that we want, people who, in our organization, there is no drama. We just don't have interpersonal conflicts. We don't have those kinds of things because we hire the right people to fit our culture right up front. Maybe your culture is different. Maybe you're in a really competitive environment. A lot of sales-oriented environments are really very competitive, and they really want alpha salespeople. I just don't. For me, we've looked at hiring out real alpha type salespeople, and it's never worked in our organization because of who we are. Those people are just kind of grinding against who we are as an organization. And oh, by the way, you like my hamburger and French fries cufflinks? Isn't that cool? But we found that if we will have 2 or 3 at a minimum behavioral event interview questions around values during the employee selection process, that gets us 90% of the way there, because these prospective employees, they don't know what our values are. And so you can usually figure out pretty quickly if they're jerking your chain or not during the interview, just by saying, tell me about a time. And often when I do a behavioral event interview question, I will pose it in a way that makes it look like our value isn't what we're looking for. So always act with integrity. A great question to look at the opposite of that, to see, give that applicant an opportunity to tell you a time where, tell me about a time where you had to cut corners in order to get a product out the door, or to complete a project. Tell me about a time where you felt like a standard was unreasonable, and you had to misrepresent or fudge, and you make it sound like you're kind of sympathetic to that, and then some employees, some prospective employees will back away from that, and well, no, that's I've had a situation where I felt that pressure to do that, but here's what I did instead. Okay, well, tell me about that. And you get deeper into it. So you're not signaling them, because it's real easy to wave that red flag and say, here's what I'm looking for. And, our applicants have been trained by these resume coaches and interview guides and all these things about how to, get by those kind of questions, which almost makes behavioral event interviewing useless now, unless you're really thinking through what the questions are and how you phrase them so that you're not telling the applicants. So, but I think you ought to have some real focus during the application and interview process about values, because behavior follows values, right? How, what that person's core values are in the organization is going to determine how they behave once they're in the organization. And you can develop skills. Maybe you can help them modify their behavior. Certainly some people are more coachable than others, but in reality, ultimately, you're not going to be able to change their values or their core behavior, the things that drive and motivate them. And it's probably not fair to ask them to. When you really think about it, they need to be in an environment where they can be their genuine selves, their best selves. And maybe that means it's not part of your environment. And that's fine. So God bless them. Go find something. And, I'll be glad to send you to my competitors if you're a bull in a china shop. And so we hire for values. You can include them prominently in your job description, your job posting. In fact, in our job description, the first paragraph says, this is the title of the job. This is who they report to. Then the next paragraph, the very first section of that job description says this person, in whatever the role is, will always operate in accordance with Imperative's 3 core values. And we list those things. And so when that person sees their job description, they understand this is exactly what's expected of you. And there's no, if you have questions, ask us. We'll talk about it. But really, there's no doubt that we're serious about it. This is right in this is the number one part of your job. Before writing background checks or doing employment verifications or accounting, the number one job is to always act with integrity. The number two job is, and these aren't in order, but any specific order, but number two is always work as one with compassion and respect. And the third is always act in the best interest of the client. That is your job. Now you perform your job by demonstrating these competencies and by doing these tasks, but your job is to do these three things, to live these values. You can put your values in your job description, sometimes, or in your job postings. Having those right there on your job posting may flag to somebody, yeah, this is what they're looking for, but it may also deter people, especially if somebody, they don't want, I don't want to work in a high pressure competitive place. And so if I see a value of excellence through competition, or I saw one recently that made me cringe just because I would hate it. And I'm a pretty competitive person, but I don't like the meat grinder kind of workplace. But I can't remember what they said, but whatever it was basically business is a blood sport. And that was their approach. That's how they approach it, which is fine because that's going to attract certain kinds of people. Probably jacked on steroids and eight gallons of coffee every morning. But that's, there's a place for those folks. So it's just maybe not in another organization. So we want to hire for those. And then a good BEI question along that lines again is, tell me about your values. What do you value as a person? Most people haven't thought about that. So I wouldn't ding them for it. I might even say, okay, take 5 minutes. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. You want a cup of coffee? Take 5 minutes, write that down. Think through what your values are as a person. What do you really value? And, I've got a list that I've developed over the years of mine. And the number one value for me is fun. I don't like doing things that aren't fun. I've designed my life. I've been married to a fun lady for 22 years. It'll be 20. Oh, 20. No, I better not say that. I've been married to her for 24 years. It'll be 25 in January. And I've designed my life so that I get to do a lot of fun things. I'm taking yoga teacher training because I think yoga is fun. And I've been practicing yoga for years. Now I'm doing teacher training at 52 years old. So that's one of my top values. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I don't know that a prospective employer would necessarily enjoy that, hearing that, but it's true. And if you give me a job that's not fun, that's not situated to, the things that I enjoy and value, I'm going to do a horrible job. And so being frank about that. So let somebody take some time, think down, write down the top 3 or 4 things that really motivate you. If somebody says money and success, financial success are the number 1, 2, or 3, and this is a job that tops out at $40,000 a year, maybe this isn't the right job for that person. Or if your focus isn't, is more about incentivizing, work-life balance and things like that. And somebody just says, all I want to do is work. I just love the grind. I love hitting the big goals. And you're like, well, no, we work 40 hours a week here. We want you to go home at the end of the day and enjoy your family, enjoy your life. We don't want people in here on the weekends. It's just not how we do business. Then maybe you need to, help that person find an organization that they're better fit for. So I really do think that hiring for values will solve so many of your problems right up front, and it'll help your employee turnover. It'll help you find people who are on the same page with you about what the meaning of what the work is. I mean, everybody wants to work someplace meaningful and feel like their job's meaningful, but it's not, if they don't value what you do and they don't value who you serve, then they're not gonna stick around. They're not gonna have that sense of meaning and purpose. And then we want to manage for values. That should be part of, every performance conversation. On an ongoing basis, we should be constantly talking to our employees and our team members and our leaders about our values. Be constantly reminding them what we say our values are. It should be prominent in the handbook and all that, but more importantly, it should be in each conversation we have, hey, Joe, we had this issue with this background check report that you made an error on. It's kind of problematic because it got to the client. They were understanding once we realized what happened and fixed it, and they were cool about it. But Joe, one of our core values is always act with integrity. And we can see from the internal notes, you caught the mistake after the fact, but you didn't bring it to anybody's attention. You just let that ride. That's not what we do. We've got two values, really: always act in the best interest of the client and always act with integrity. So that's a misalignment, and that's not the kind of behavior we want in the organization. You got to be able to have those very honest conversations with folks. But usually, again, it's not competencies that we have problems with. It's their behaviors and their values, and that boils down to values. And often we give people, once we give people the freedom to really follow our values, and they know there's no penalty for following the values, and they're not, hey, we screw up. That happens. People make mistakes. But when you do, here's how we handle as an organization. We work as one with compassion and respect. You're not going to get hung out to dry. Now, if you demonstrate that you just don't have the competencies, you can't consistently do the job, then we're going to have a different conversation. We're going to try to reskill you, train you up, or help you find the right place for you, either in the organization or outside. But, those are conversations you can have when you're talking about values, and people get it. And they want to work for organizations like that. One thing you can do is have a separate sign off from your employee handbook that lists these are the values. And I understand I'm expected to operate at all times according to our values. That just drives home to them because, I'm signing a separate document just for our values. This is how important, and it's not a liability waiver or anything like that. They don't want me to sign a separate piece of paper just to say, this is how I'm going to behave here. And everybody else here has signed the same document. During your employee staff meetings, spend time recognizing people who've lived your values. Now, like at our organization, our behavioral profile, if you're familiar with this, or the predictive index, it's we've got for our analysts, they're very low dominance, low sociability, real high steadiness, high conscientiousness, and so they hate being called out. So when we have our quarterly full staff meeting lunch, and I'm calling out people for that, they're like, oh my gosh, thank you, but don't call me out in front of everybody. But even then, though, they recognize, and I make it as painless as possible, but they recognize, hey, we really do take these things seriously. And so recognizing that and having conversations around it all the time is really key to making values part of the organization. So how much time do I have? I've got 1 minute. Okay, but I will stick around. Are there any questions anybody has? Feel free to drop them into the chat box if there's anything I can answer for anyone. Again, the HRCI and SHRM recertification information will be sent out to everyone after the webinar. If you're watching the recording of this webinar on our website, welcome. I'm glad you did that. And again, there should be just below this video. In that case, there will be a form for you to fill out. There will be a keyword that you're looking for, I think, to do that. And the keyword will be values. And so to get the credit, you had to watch to the very end to get the keyword so you can fill out the form and get the credit. And it's values with an S at the end, VALUES. But not seeing any other questions, I'm going to say thank you all for joining. The next webinar is about ethics. And so moving beyond values and really getting deep into what an ethical business environment looks like. And that's on September 30th. And you can register for that at imperativeinfo.com. I want to thank everybody again for joining us. And I hope you all have a great, wonderful, Betty, thank you. Valuable presentation. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk soon. In the meantime, as always, if there's anything I can do for you. One other thing I want to throw out there. I forgot. I need to put a slide in here for that. I have a podcast now. It's called Good Morning HR, and it's on. You can go to goodmorninghr.com and listen. We drop a new episode every week. We've been doing 2 a week for the last couple weeks, and but goodmorninghr.com, and every one of those episodes are each 30 minutes, and they're worth half a recertification credit from both SHRM and HRCI. So you can get recertification credit simply for listening to a podcast. And I don't do most of the talking in those podcasts because I interview interesting leaders about the issues that they have bringing people together to create value for shareholders and customers and the community. And so it's all about people management, and it's geared for HR folks, small business owners, folks like that. So goodmorninghr.com, and it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere. So, and the recording will be on the recording of this webinar will be on the website here within the next day or two, and you can share that feel free to share that with anyone. Thank you again, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Be good, do good, and keep your chin up. Bye-bye.